You are now live.
We are now live. Okay, we are back. And we are going to go back to this point and talk a little bit about the child tax credit and possibilities for doing that a little differently. So Graham, you're here. I have Senator McDonald, I can give you one of those.
Thank you.
I have a couple of copies of section by sections of the child tax credit. If anybody wants one, I believe they are also on our website from last week. I've got 3 more. These are left over, I think, from the first time we did them. And people got them out. So Graham, I know you're just gonna do the financing. We'll have to wait for Abby for the actual wording, but.
Sure, thank you.
Kind of just tell us what this one does and then ideas that you might have.
Yeah, absolutely. For the record, Graham Campbell from the Joint Fiscal Office. So let me share my screen. There's a document on the committee's webpage about various iterations of the child tax credit. Let me zoom in here so you can see. So H510 is sitting in your committee. It's passed the House. It includes a child tax credit, a new child tax credit in Vermont. And what it is, it's a $1,200 refundable credit for each child ages 6 and under in a family. So if you have 2 children, you get $2,400, 2 children under the age of 6. It is full credit, so you get the full $1,200, up to $200,000 in AGI for both single and married taxpayers. But then it phases out quickly after that. So basically by I think it's $22,000, you receive 0 credit. It would benefit we estimate about 40,000 children would receive $1,200 full tax credit. And as we've talked about a couple of times in this committee already, is that the total cost of this bill is $48 million. So it reduces revenues for the state by $48 million a year.
Madam Chair.
Okay. Okay, Senator Pearson and then Senator Sriracha.
Just curious, 40,000 children, roughly how many families is that? Do we have any sense?
Yes, not families, tax returns. I'm just going to pull up the fiscal note for this because it includes how many taxpayers. Generally, I think it's like 1.4 kids per return is how many would benefit. So let me just quickly apologize for the delay. 510. I will get back to you, so I'm not keeping the committee waiting on how many families that is.
Thanks.
Okay. Senator Sriracha.
So Graham, there's no limit on how many kids one filer can claim?
That's correct.
So, obviously, probably 6 would be pushing it, but
No,
5, but there's no it doesn't stop at 2 or 3 or anything like that, right?
No, that's correct. So if you have 6 kids, you would get 6 times $1,200. There's no limit on the amount of credit you can receive.
under the age of 7.
Under the age, 6
under 6 or under, yes.
And There's no,
And
there's no requirement for paying for childcare or anything like that.
nothing, no, there's no work requirement, there's no paying, no stipulation on what the money's used for, anything like that.
And we don't have any breakdown of what what subsidies were given for childcare already. Aren't we giving some money to help people pay for childcare presently, at least low income people?
Yes, we have
Absolutely.
CFAP. CCFAP.
CCFAP, yeah, provides state child care subsidies for families of lower and middle incomes. Just to return to Senator Pearson's question about how many families, we estimate just under 35,000 families would benefit from this.
We could get the presentation in here, but a family of 3 on Reach Up is getting an $835 a month payment. That's for your rent, anything like diapers, which is becoming a very big deal in health and welfare. Toilet paper, which has been a big deal. Any of those things that are not covered by food stamps, but again, food stamps is a card, it's not cash. And I know when I talked to the appropriations chair, who has been trying to get the Reach Up families some help, she said this $1,200 would be more than we could ever do for a family in the terms of benefits. And we do, there was a question that came up about how this would interact with the Social Security deduction, because some of our folks are on SSI or disability, so we're gonna check that out too before we go through this. This is very simple. I think modeled on the feds, it's just $1,200 a kid.
That's right. And recipients can use it on whatever they want. The CCFAP program, the amount of the subsidy that the families receive depends on the size of the family. But for someone receiving 100% payment, for a family of 2, you're talking incomes less than $25,000 a year, and generally the subsidy's gone if you make more than $65,000-ish to $70,000 a year in household income. And that's for a family of 2.
There's questions. Okay.
So
we have no more questions on, and this is just the numbers, not the policy. This is the numbers that Graham's gonna look at with us. And then we can, when Abby is back, we will go through the words and the policy, so. Okay, so Graham, these are possible ways we could get the cost down. I assume we could also raise more revenue. But these are things that you've kind of thought out.
That's correct. Yep. So I was sort of instructed by Chair Cummings and Senator Kitchell to look at ways of reducing the cost of the child tax credit to $45 million instead of $48 million. The $45 million is on the previous presentation I gave about sort of that construct to get to the overall revenue reductions laid out to sort of give the Senate budget the space that it's looking for. But this is, so all the ideas here cost basically $45 million. But then there was a desire to look at a way of doing a more progressive structure than the House. So the House, basically, it's a universal credit for people under $200,000, same credit for every single family, regardless of income. And then once you make over $200,000, it goes away extremely quickly. And so more or less, the vast majority of the credit is $1,200 for anyone between $0 and $200,000 in adjusted gross income. The ideas that I'm presenting here generally create a larger credit than the house for families with lower and middle incomes, and lesser credit amounts than the house for upper, middle, and upper income taxpayers. And so I've sort of labeled what the overall sort of scheme is. So idea one is what I'm calling the big credit for lower incomes with a long phase out. So the base credit is $1,350, so $1,350 for taxpayers below $25,000 in adjusted gross income. So for these taxpayers, they would receive a bigger tax credit than the house per child, $150 more per child than the house. And the credit phases out $50 for every $10,000 in income. So what that means is after $25,000, the $1,350 phases out depending upon what your income is. And so such that by $295,000, if you have children ages 6 and under, you will not receive any tax credit. But if you have children, say at $280,000 in income under the age of 6, they'll receive something like, $20.
Graham, Madam Chair, Madam Chair, I've been jumping in a lot because I feel like you can't see me today.
I can't see you. I've just got Graham's picture on the screen when he's talking.
So then I hope
yeah.
you don't mind me jumping in. Graham, how can this idea one have a higher income cap, goes all the way up to 295 than the house, and impact fewer children? That doesn't make any sense to me.
Because let me see here. So you're asking why it benefits 40,000 in the house, but that's because I need to double check the model. That's a good question. I don't have a great answer to that. Maybe I might have miswrote that.
Longer, thinner tail.
Yeah, but it's a longer tail. I mean, more kids get less than the house, but how could it be less kids if we're going to almost
Going through is a
100,000?
phase out of $50 for every 10K of income. So,
Yeah, but it goes up to $295,000 and the house one only goes up
Right,
to
but
200,000.
if the line pitches down faster, you can have
It doesn't. You're not hearing this. The house ends at 200 grand.
right, but it has no step down.
I'm not going to explain it to you, Senator Bray. Graham,
Okay, well,
you can
We'll
try to
let
help.
Graham
Yeah.
check the
I guess I have egg on my face because I don't know the answer right off the top of my head. My first initial guess is that the total cost of the credit's lower. So there's just less money going into the system. And so I see the question that you're asking, but I don't quite know the answer, unfortunately, off the top of my head. I'll have to look at the model, but that's but basically what this is that you're giving a higher credit for lower incomes relative to the house, and then quite a lesser credit depending upon your income, relative to the house. And so that idea one cost $45 million. Idea two is the same sort of idea, but it's a bigger credit at lower incomes with a shorter phase out. So it doesn't go as long. And so you get $1,350 in refundable credit for taxpayers below $50,000 in AGI. So the bigger expanded credit goes up to $50,000 instead of $25,000 as it was in idea one, but then it phases out quicker after that. So by $230,000, the credit is gone. And so I kind of have to double check whether this is right, because now I'm calling into question what this whole bullet point, but 33,000 would benefit. But anyway, the total cost for this idea is $45 million. Another idea three, is an even bigger credit at lower incomes, but a quite quick phase out. So a $1,450 credit for those below $225,000 in AGI, but it phases out $90 for every $10,000 after that. So the credit is zero if you make $186,000 or more. and that costs $45 million. And then finally, the last idea, which is sort of the simplest, I think, is the same construct as the house, except instead of the income threshold being $200,000, they're $150,000. So you get a $1,200 credit for every child age 6 and under. It'd be a full credit, $1,200, but it would phase out quickly after $150,000, so that by $174,000, the credit would be zero. And this one estimated 37,500 children would receive the full $1,200 credit. And that's sort of compared to the 40,000 that would receive it under the house. And that is estimated to cost just under $45 million. So those are 4 ideas that I've come up with. And this chart kind of just shows the phase outs. So this is for one child, age 6 and under, how much credit you would receive depending upon your income. So your income is on the x-axis and your credit is on the y-axis. So the yellow line here is basically what the house looks like. You're getting $1,200 all the way up to 200,000. And then once you hit 200,000, it just sort of drops quickly until you're getting nothing by about $223,000. Idea 1 gives you the expanded credit for anyone making under $25,000, and then that starts phasing out, such that basically under idea 1, if you make under $60,000, idea 1 would be a better situation for you if you had kids under 6. But the phase out is very long for the blue line. So basically under idea 1, if you make over $60,000, you're doing worse than the house. But again, once you get over $223,000, because there's no credit in the house version, you would be doing better than the house. You'd be getting a couple $100. Idea 3 is, or idea 2 is sort of the same deal as idea 1, but it just phases out a little bit quicker. So under that one, if you are making under $80,000 in income, then you'd be doing better than the house. You get more credit. But after that, you'd be getting less credit. And basically, the orange line and the yellow line end more or less at the same point in the income distribution. After about $225,000, there'd be no credit under either proposal. Idea 3, you're doing significantly better than the house, from 0 to about $25,000 in adjusted gross income. But then the phase out is very, very steep. So again, by about $60,000, you're better off being under idea 3 than the house proposal. But then after that, it's particularly worse for families with children under the age of 6, making in the neighborhood of $140,000 to $180,000. You're receiving quite a lot less credit than the house proposal. And then finally, idea 4 is basically the same idea as the house, except the phase out starts at $150,000. And so you can see the yellow line covers the green line, but then the green line drops to 0 by $176,000.
Okay, Senator Hardy has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Graham, this is helpful, interesting, but I'm interested in a more big picture as I'm trying to assess the overall how this fits into our tax structure. We have other tax credits that are not just minor tax credits, but sort of more major, like I would categorize this one, I think. And I'm wondering if you could if you have anything that shows this, or you could prepare something or talk about it off the cuff, like how does this compare to other tax credits we have in terms of the magnitude and in terms of the population that it hits or helps?
Yeah, so I guess I could put something together, but off the cuff, what I would say, magnitude-wise, this is by far and away larger than anything else we do in our tax. So the earned income tax credit is about $28 million total, and it helps about 42 to 45,000 tax returns a year. The average credit there is about $680. So that's a fully refundable credit. That helps families basically under 50,000 in AGI. You receive a bigger credit if you have more children. But that credit is only for those who have earned income. So if you, the amount of earned income determines the size of your credit. So let's say you have one spouse working, one staying at home, your earned income tax credit is likely to be less than if both of them are working. But even the House proposal is $1,200. So, the average child tax credit would be in the House proposal about $1,200. So almost double what the earned income tax credit is. And so for those earning the earned income tax credit who make under about $50,000, they would, if they're the average earned income tax credit family, would receive about $700 in earned income tax credit, plus $1,200 for every single child that they have. So this would easily become the most generous tax credit that we have for those who are receiving it.
Okay, so the earned income tax credit is right now our biggest tax credit.
By a mile, yes.
Something that you've already done, just that summarizes what the earned income tax credit is. I tried to write down what you just said really fast, but I missed some of it. If you have something already that you could send to Faith, because that's really helpful actually to sort of put this in perspective, to know that this one is much bigger than anything we have on the books. And how many people benefit from earned income tax credit? Did you say that?
About 40 to 45,000 tax returns in a given year. And this is about 34,000 tax returns in a given year with benefits.
Okay.
A lot of the same people do.
And yeah, I would assume, as Senator Strachan just said, probably overlaps with some of the same people that would get the child tax credit. If you get the earned income tax credit and you have kids, young kids, you would get the child tax credit most likely.
Absolutely, yes, because the earned income tax credit really is, I would say, its policy around it is designed to help working families with children. That earned income tax credit for individuals without children has sort of been a policy item that's been tossed around for a long time, because that credit is significantly smaller than those who have children. So for the vast majority of people receiving their income tax credit, or not the vast majority of people, the people who have larger earned income tax credits in the state, I should say, are almost certainly those with children. The earned income tax credit for those without children is very small relative to the others. Yeah. So
the earned income tax credit, you said this, but you have to be filing taxes to get it, correct? But
yes, and that
this child tax credit, you don't?
No, you would have to file your taxes to receive it.
In both cases, you have to file your taxes. You don't just get the credit. Okay. So was there a discussion in the House of just expanding the earned income tax credit? Why did they go this direction instead of that direction?
You'll have to tell why.
You don't know why. I'm just, well, I mean, it's policy, but I'm just wondering what their discussion was.
Well, the other side of it is that the earned income, so I don't know. So it's not necessarily the exact same population. So, you would have people earning their earned income tax credit who have, by definition, you have to have earned income to have it. And then there are just a lot of restrictions on the earned income tax credit. Like if you have greater than, I think, 10,000 in investment income, which includes, say, capital gains or, dividend income, and you have children, you're not allowed to claim the earned income tax credit. The earned income tax credit has very strict income limits. So basically anyone under $60,000 does not receive any earned income tax credit.
Oh, okay.
And so you're expanding the goal here, I guess, in general, is to help families with young children. And the earned income tax credit does do that, but it only does it for a certain families with certain income levels, with certain types of income. Because you can imagine a family that might have under 60,000 in income, but suppose, they have, investment income of some sort in some year, or you might imagine a family that's reporting AGI of $50,000, but the reason their AGI is $50,000 is because they run a business and they've deducted away some of their income. They would not be eligible for the earned income tax credit, but they would be eligible for this.
Okay, so this is really hitting more middle class, what we would maybe consider as middle class, and the earned income tax credit is more for people working class or people living in poverty? Or is that too much of a general?
I don't know. I wouldn't say it's more general. I would say this tax credit basically is a tax credit for low income, middle and upper income taxpayers. It's because it's $1,200 up to 200,000
Right.
AGI. Whereas the earned income tax credit, I would characterize that as right. It's more for lower and lower middle income earned income earners.
Okay. Are there other tax credits in our tax system that are larger that besides the earned income tax credit?
Nowhere near the size. So the
Okay.
earned income tax credit is, I think, about 25 to $30 million a year. And I think the next biggest one might be the charitable tax credit. And that's the 5% on charitable contributions tax credit. And I think that's about $10 million a year.
Okay.
And so, but that tax credit really, so it's not refundable, and it really is not, I guess, in the same sort of vein as, the earned income tax credit. It's more just, if you give to charity, we'll give you 5% back.
And we have severely restricted that. I just got an email. In Vermont, when we redid the tax code, as we also severely restricted medical deductions from the Vermont income tax. You can still do them at the federal level, which is the big level. This would also, Graham, help perhaps disabled families that weren't working but had a child or two.
Yep,
which
that's
is
correct.
another thing, it will help folks that aren't able to work. It will help reach out families. And so there is a broader swath in there. And question came up as to how this would, and I don't even remember it except vaguely, this would kind of mesh, or would it impact the Social Security exemption? So we had Sean Brown coming in today to talk, but I really wanted to give us time to work our way through this one. But as much as we can, I'm trying to move things around tomorrow to get folks in to talk about how this would mesh with other provisions in the tax code, and just to make sure we aren't having some unintended consequences. So Senator Bray and then Senator Sirotkin.
I said something like this last week, and it's, so I'll say it again. Given that median income is roughly 60,000, 62,000, I don't know why we're constructing a program that goes to 300 or 400% of median income. It seems like the shifting it to those who need the assistance more makes more sense to me. Then we get a higher benefit, but it would also reduce the overall program costs by making a steeper decline, so it zeroes out at a lower number. And I think even the least beneficent one here goes to 180,000, which is roughly 3 times median. So I don't quite get the thinking behind that.
I think some of the thinking, and I'm not gonna ask Graham because that's policy, but from what I've heard, in both the governor's proposals and in the House's proposals, we had a big jump in revenue. A certain amount of it is predicted to stay. It's not, the rate of growth is going to jump down, but we had a big growth in revenue in the last 2 or 3 years. And the idea was to give some of it back to taxpayers either to encourage or support. So there's been proposals by the governor for tax credits to employment sectors. We're trying to attract student loan forgiveness, but the idea has been there's there's additional revenue. We could also put it into new programs, but so far the thinking has been, how do you share the wealth with the taxpayers who created the wealth? And you can do it trying to attract teachers, or you can do it saying, we'd like to attract young families, and give a benefit to them, because as a broad swath, they're what we're looking. But I think that's what's going on. We have this additional pocket of revenue, and the question is, how do, what is the most constructive way to share that with families? And we did have the presentation in here originally, the federal numbers for the impact of the federal child tax credit in reduced hunger, children moving out of poverty. Considering that was what, a 2-year benefit, those numbers look good. So we are not bound by anything
Well, I think to that point,
except Friday.
to compare, so I want to be clear, I'm entirely supportive of helping people. It's just the, I don't know that you're moving out of poverty if you're in the 100,000 plus.
Now, this is sharing, not moving out of poverty.
And that's the largest segment served on that chart, so.
But we can play with that chart in any way that we want. We can adjust any of the stop points. We can adjust slants, space outs, amounts. We can
Well, maybe
do what we want.
Can I ask one quick question? Maybe you know the answer, maybe Graham. I just want to make sure I'm remembering right. What was so in a way, we're replacing the federal program that's going away. Can you remind us what the federal program delivered for benefits?
So the federal program was for 1 year, tax year 2021. And I'll have to just double check exactly what it is. But the way it worked is there was first a base child tax credit that was about $2,000, and that phased out. I can't remember at what income level. But then there was an enhanced child tax credit for young children, and that was an additional $1,600 on top. So it was up to a $3,600 tax credit, and I think it was for children under the ages 6 and under, just like this one. And so that expanded child tax credit, the additional $1,600. So if you had young children, you were getting $3,600 a year in refundable tax credit. It was fully refundable, and it was made an advanced child tax credit. So you were given $300 per month. And then the rest, so that was about half the tax credit. And the second half of the tax credit was issued when you filed your taxes, right now, basically, you're filing your taxes for tax year 2021. So it was about, for the equivalent for the feds for tax year 2021 was about $3,600 in child tax credit. This is $1,200.
And that was regardless of the number of children, or was there a per child figure in there that you said?
That's the per child figure, $3,600 per child. I don't believe there was a limit on the number of children that could qualify for it. So if you had 5 kids, 6 and under, you would get 5 times $3,600.
Thank you. We're not replacing that.
Madam Chair?
Yes, I've got Senator Sirotkin and then you, Senator Pearson.
So I guess I look at the gap that we have here as being more like 12 million that you're trying to reconcile between the House and what we did. And I just wondering, Graham, can you run these scenarios to say, instead of $3 million, something like $12 million. And we're gonna have to go to conference on this anyhow. If we go $3 million below them, we'll wind up at $1.5 million. We might as well not change it. It just seems like, why raise taxes in other areas in a period where we have so much money coming in when we're giving a generous benefit here, and this is a much easier place to make that gap up by massaging this and still be very generous in this area rather than giving up almost entirely what the House has done and then have to go look for other taxes.
Well, and practically speaking, there's no established constituency for this yet. Right?
That's another thing.
Try taking it away.
Well, it's not there yet.
No, it is not there yet, but it has been talked
Across the
about.
hall.
Okay, yeah, I've got Senator Pearson and then Senator Brock.
I found myself completely agreeing with Senator Bray that that it does not seem top priority for me to help families at the twice the median household income. Once we get up over $150,000, it does strike me as questionable priority. But I'm very pleased actually to see this helping middle class families, because too often they're paying full freight and just miss the cutoff in a lot of cases. So I just, going back to Senator Hardy's questions, Graham, about the earned income tax credit. Can you, I think you said this, but I missed it. What is the income threshold? It's a fairly limited universe, and where does that, and maybe it phases out a little bit, but what is the top amount of money you can earn and be eligible for the EITC?
I think it depends on how many children you have, but as my understanding is that it's for like a family of two, it's somewhere for, as a family of two filing jointly, I think it's somewhere just over $50,000. I remember.
Family with two kids or just a couple?
Two kids.
Yeah. So a family of four with two kids, just over 50. So that is about my memory. And I don't know if we hammered on that point, but it speaks to the sharp contrast with what's considered here. And I think this goes too far, in my opinion, but it would be nice to be able to return something to sort of solid middle-class families. So, but not this generous, in my opinion. Anyway, thanks.
Okay, Senator Brock. Graham, did you have?
I just wanted to, I think the committee members have been touching upon sort of what the thinking was in the House. I don't want to speak for the House, but I think the understanding based upon some of the testimony that I gave and the research that Pat and I did on who are families with young children in Vermont, is that basically is what you see in this table here, is that families with young children in Vermont kind of run across the entire income distribution. It's not like families who are lower and middle income have more children than those that don't. So, for instance, you see sort of what I'm calling the first wave of children happening in this table between 25 and 75,000, about 10%. But there are a lot of families that make above the median income and sometimes up to 3 times the median income in Vermont. Roughly 17% of families in Vermont making incomes between $100,000 and $200,000 have young children in Vermont. And so what I think you're seeing there is, when you have families with young children, there is more necessity to work because there's higher expenses. And so you're starting to reflect that. And so I think when the House was thinking about this, they were sort of looking at this income distribution and the distribution of families with young children within the income distribution, and sort of saying, if they made the cutoff too low, then they'd be excluding a very large number of families with young children from the child tax credit. And so I think that was one consideration they had, but I can't speak to the other sort of policy considerations about what, why they wanted to help. But this sort of distribution, I think, did influence their desire not to go much below $200,000 in income.
Okay. I am sending Faith notes on who we can get. For tomorrow. And so far, I've got the Abby, hopefully, if she's back. We did have Sean Brown coming in to talk about the Social Security exemption and any interplay. And we'll get tax in to talk about any kind of interplay on the tax codes. Yeah, I think probably those lower incomes, if you want to break it down, you might find more senior citizens in there. Thus, just as a percentage, kids hitting that middle. But there definitely is a cluster in there between 50 and 200. So I don't know. Committee. Senator Brock,
I did.
you have a question? Okay.
Well, I just have a concern that I'd like to put on the table is that, and I know we haven't gotten to the policy discussion yet, which is coming, which will give us time to do some of that. But I'd just like us to keep in mind that right now, the biggest policy is the decision to lump all of this tax relief in the child tax credit and virtually nothing else. It's a small amount of Social Security. When we have the governor's tax proposal, which was very different, and it distributed tax relief much more broadly. We're doing tax relief right now for about, by my count, 34,000 Vermonters. But we have not taken into account things like limiting this tax credit to a certain group or a smaller group, increasing things like the earned income tax credit, increasing the child dependent care tax credit, expanding income thresholds for our Social Security recipients, exempting military pensions, which we've talked about, removing the cap on student loan interest deduction, a tax credit for nurses, and a tax credit for childcare workers, which is a much broader base of people to distribute benefits to on the basis of both need and on the basis of, in effect, a return on investment to the state. Here, I just find it concerning that we limited it to one group and one group only, and we've been exceedingly generous, as has been mentioned here, in the way we've done it. So I would just like to make sure we keep those things on the table when we get to the discussion of the policy at all, and not simply accept what the House has done by this exclusive reliance on the child tax care credit to the exclusion of virtually everything else.
And we started through the governors last week or the week before. I got somehow bogged down in salt. But we will ask perhaps the tax commissioner to come in tomorrow. Well, I think we're just gonna have to, I do need to get the telehealth thing because it's just a fee and it has to go to a pro. So I'm gonna get that out of here tomorrow, barring any surprises. And let me know who you'd like to hear from. And we'll take a look at this. We'll ask to have somebody from the House come in and tell us what they were thinking. And then, and if we want Graham to do another run, we need to tell him an income level. Senator Pearson, I can't tell it. Maybe Graham, you can take your sheet down. And I can see Senator Pearson. There he is. Because I've heard a couple folks say the income level is high. And, you know, if you're at 150,000, and I know when we first started doing this, we talked about dropping the income level to 150, but there weren't that many. There wasn't that much of an impact between 50 and 200. But I think we need to tell Graham what will we consider an acceptable income level. There's always the chance we could drop the income level and geez, that's new.
Party out there.
Well, no, I mean, normally in the good old days, it would get very rowdy out there as crowds waited to go to a roast.
Join the party.
Yeah, we regularly would go out and tell them to pipe down. Anyway, we need to give them an income level to work with. We could also do more than 2 kids or up the ages. Senator Sorokin has gone across the hall. Maybe that's what's causing all the noise.
Isn't it?
But
There's no limit on the number of kids.
under 6, yeah, that's right, there's no limit, but we could up it to 7 or 8, we could up
Oh, I
the
see.
age or, as Senator Sorokin has suggested, do we just want to reduce it by 12 million? So we don't have to raise any additional revenue. And I assume if we dropped it by 10 million, well, 12, is that really what we'd like to do? And we'll see if we could do that, and see what it would take to do a child tax credit that wouldn't require any revenue raising. Isn't that what I'm hearing?
Or a tax credit or equivalent
Or,
thereof that could be made up differently depending upon our policy discussion.
right,
Aren't we having the policy discussion now?
We're starting.
Are you holding back on your policy discussion?
Oh, I got
Lynn?
much more.
I was gonna say, but don't
Much
hold
more.
back. I want to hear it. I want the policy discussion.
okay,
I'll give you something in writing to look at.
You're gonna give me something in writing or Austin said?
okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious, I mean, if we're gonna talk about some of the things you just mentioned, I'm sure it's already been done by the governor, but some kind of table that shows who it would impact, what,
Yeah,
you know, what would
I
be
will give
the,
it to you this afternoon.
thank you. And I think that as much as I think that the child tax credit is a great idea, I mean, I would have qualified for 3 of these for a few years, because I have 3 kids and they were under 6.
I have
But
3 under 7.
yeah, I would have gotten for all 3 of them, and I think that it would have been super helpful. That's when our income was much lower and we were struggling to get by, and I think it is extremely helpful, and it would help pay for things like diapers and things like that.
But
So
that
we
was
have
when
to
your
talk
income
about,
was lower.
my income was lower,
And
my
that's
kids were younger, and
One of the
that's,
problems with this bill.
but I think that most people actually, when their kids are younger, their incomes are lower. You know, it was before.
That's not what
That's
the statistics seem to say.
No, but if you look at the table, there's still the majority of kids are under 100,000.
Mhm.
Right, Graham?
But-
Am I reading this correctly? Still 100, they're under 100,000. And in fact, probably the majority are under 75. But there is a chunk between 100 and 200, but that's $100,000 range. The others are $25,000 ranges. So it's a bigger range. So I like the idea of this tax credit. I like the way it's targeted to people who probably need it the most. And I'm also really concerned about carrying forward a tax credit of this magnitude beyond the next couple of years and backing ourselves or whoever our successors are into a corner of a popular tax credit for people with kids, and then they're stuck with $40 million hole. And so I'm concerned about that. And so I would like to find a way to target it more. Maybe looking at certainly the income level, 150 and below, with a ramp down, and maybe 5 years old instead of 6 years old, because I think you could make the argument that after 5, your kids are in school and it's a little bit easier to make ends meet. So I think that
When's pre-K? 5?
3,
When are you full-time in school?
5, kindergarten starts at 5. So-
6, thanks.
No, it starts at 5. So
When we went to school, it was.
So I think, and I would, like I said, be interested in looking at some of the targeted things, not the, there are so few things on that list that I'm interested in looking at, but I don't want to back ourselves into a corner.
Okay. Senator Pearson, did you have anything at this point?
I'm enjoying what Senator Hardy's saying. I think that's interesting to me, what she's outlining.
Okay. Senator McDonald.
So with the workforce issues, I think to the extent that we help people get childcare before the kids go to school, that's going to have an extra benefit if the tax credits help them go to work and fill jobs that need to be filled.
I think, yeah, because the proposed tax credits only hit, I think, two professions, which in 3 years may not be the professions. We're facing shortages everywhere, so I think that was part of this
But
argument.
we could do a temporary tax
No, we're
credit.
not voting anything out.
Well, maybe,
Down
Already
here
voted.
Friday.
so
And back some things we've already voted out.
So
Okay.
can I ask a clarifying question? I thought you said, Senator Hardy, something that I didn't pick up on in Graham's presentation. Is the child tax credit per child with no limit on number of children per household?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, I missed that on the first pass.
Yeah.
there has been talk of a child care tax credit. I'm sorry. And that's a, a different policy, but that I'd like us to at least understand. If we're putting things on the table, I'd like, that would be my request to, in addition to some of the limits that Senator Hardy was pointing out, income limits, that particular policy, I'd like us to dig into a little bit.
All
I
right.
think that's on the governor's list, right, Randy?
Yeah.
Senator Brock? Yeah.
Okay, so there is a bill with a child care tax credit.
Well, there's a proposal. It's not been translated into a bill.
Yeah.
Okay. So, who would be the one to talk to us about that?
Well,
Will you find out?
Commissioner.
Commissioner Bolio would be one to talk about.
All right,
I mean,
maybe Sean Brown, somebody.
There's a
who-
child and dependent care tax credit.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
already there.
that's been talked
Okay.
about, and the notion was expanding it.
All right,
And that's what was in the governor's tax proposal.
child and dependent care, that's not,
would that include like elder
Was it-
care?
Uh,
So dependent care, would that?
I think it would.
If I could jump in, that yeah,
please.
the governor's proposal includes a $1,000 tax credit for child care workers. It is for someone who is working in a registered child care facility. And so that's the first half. And then there's an expansion of the child and dependent care credit in the existing tax code. So for people who are paying for child care, they would receive a larger tax credit than they currently receive, and it would become fully refundable. So it's kind of 2 parts child care, one for the workers to encourage
There are two
more
separate
workers.
pieces.
plus people who are caring for elderly parents. Are who gets,
My understanding is no, it's for child care workers, registered child care workers.
The thing
Okay.
with the child care tax credit though, is that it's less flexible. It has to be used on childcare. And if you're getting CCFAP, you wouldn't necessarily get the credit because you're getting the subsidy, and so you wouldn't get the tax credit. So with the child tax credit, that's just a child tax credit, you get it regardless. And you can spend it on whatever you want or whatever you need.
Right.
What I'm reading is currently Vermont law offers two versions. For most families, they receive 24% federal credit on their Vermont taxes. The governor's proposal would expand the credit to 65%, the federal amount a family qualifies for, and would make the credit fully refundable for all families. This would help about 14,000 Vermont families pay for their child care expenses. That's the
Okay,
outline.
so we will ask, I'm assuming Faith is listening, Commissioner Bolio to talk to us about this. Committee, I think we better be prepared to work evenings this week. If we're gonna completely rewrite this and do something that is fairly complex. And that means I might not be able to do my town hall, but we've just cut out a chunk of work.
Well, I think it's mostly just looking at what the options are and
Right.
who does it impact, and getting a comparison. It's hard when we have one big thing that impacts one specific
Right.
group to really get the big picture.
So, Graham, can you do up scenarios of a much more limited child tax credit?
Yes, I can. I tried to write down some things here, but I want to make sure I have it right. So I heard iterations of, reducing the age limits, reducing the income limits. And then I heard one of just sort of saying, can we fill the sort of budget? Can we assist the appropriations committee by just cutting back the child tax credit and not doing anything else? So that would amount to basically, you would need to trim, to get to the amount the appropriations committee, you need to trim basically $16 million from the child tax credit. So the cost,
30 million, more or less. So that would be a pretty limited child tax credit. But if we do another tax credit, we're still going, if we decide to go to child care tax credit and do the governor's proposal on that, we're gonna need some revenue estimates. And I'm sure they're out there. We will ask Commissioner Bolio to talk to us about that tomorrow. All right. And remember that there's overlap in this. If you do a child tax credit, nurses, teachers, childcare workers will also be able to take part in that. It's being recorded. Can someone hit the got it sign?
Fix that.
Faith, can you tell us what's happening? We've lost Faith.
It's just a wrong push of the button. My apologies.
Okay, button got pushed. Good, all right. We're back and we're live according to the light at the top of the screen. Okay. So, anything else we want to look at? We're going to look at the child care tax credit, not dependent care, right? We're separating that out. And we need the bottom line on that one. We want to look at a reduced child tax credit that would perhaps keep us from having to raise the revenues. And that would be, I assume, the revenues that were in the fees, that 1% transfer tax is still out there. That the House did spend because they passed it. So that was, that's 3 million. We might still have to do that to balance, because the House budget had that 3 million in it. And it will depend on what we do, how much it costs. And so that,
I think Senator Rodkin had, though, I think his is the correct approach. If you're going to reduce something, reduce these tax expenditures rather than raising taxes in a year in which we have record surpluses. I think that's very hard to justify.
it has its challenges. So maybe the place to start, Graham, is see what it would look like if we could do, what is it, $135 million child tax credit? Is that
That's
about?
exactly it.
Yeah, okay. And, you know, how tight that would be. And then we can look at other proposals that would cost that much or less.
Wait, I thought you said 30 million.
If we're taking it down, if we're raising 12, so 12 from 47, 48, 35, 36.
Are we raising 12?
So
Grant?
what you'll be doing is, so I guess what I would say is if you make the child tax credit 35, so let's back up. I would say the Senate Appropriations Committee, the budget has kind of asked this committee for roughly $15 to $16 million better position than the House, okay? And the House's position on tax stuff was a net 46.5. So you need to get to a number of around 30 to 32 million. And what I would say is if you made the child tax credit $35 million, you would not need to raise any revenue. You would not need, you wouldn't have to do the property transfer charge. You wouldn't have to do mutual fund fees. You would get there because basically your child tax credit would be $13 million less than the House's. And then there's other revenue things that this committee has not done that the House has done. And you would be in a more, or you'd be cutting taxes less than the House has. And so you'd be achieving the Appropriations Committee's goals. So I guess to reiterate that, if you just cut the child tax credit to 35 million instead of it being 48, you do not need to raise any revenues, you know, property transfer tax or mutual fund fees or any other fee. And you could call it a day in terms of your tax position. And it would be that money, that new space that you're creating relative to the House would get spent in the budget.
Okay, but we still would have a very large tax credit that we would be carrying on the books for out years, and that, so that doesn't ease, it does somewhat ease my concern because it's a smaller large tax credit, but still a very large tax credit to be carrying forward.
So yes, you would have it being carried out in the out years, but I would first say two things. First, the revenue forecast is elevated relative to previous years. So I'd say you have capacity to carry a large tax credit in future years, especially one that doesn't grow like the child tax credit. The second position I would say is that the money that you're sort of saving here on your tax side is going to get absorbed into the budget. So to the extent that you think that, you know, the budget has more flexibility to sort of cut back in the event of revenue sort of potentially going down, then I guess what I'd say is that the problem about outlays and liabilities for the state government does not change regardless of whether you make the child tax credit $35 or $48 million. The decision becomes more of a, do we cut the tax credit that we have or do we cut the budget pieces that we have in the event that revenues slow down?
It's just easier to cut a tax credit that doesn't exist. Right now, we're cutting something that's just a proposal. In a couple of years, we would be cutting something that actually exists if we do it now.
Right, but what I'm saying is,
there's a difference psychologically and financially.
But if you cut the child tax, I understand that. If you cut the child tax credit now, the sort of space that you're creating there will get used in the budget and spending.
Yeah,
and so it's not, it's not like that goes away.
Okay. Senator.
I think in my mind, one of the questions is it prudent to say that, hey, we're going to spend everything we have right up to the limit that we have it, and then create what essentially is an unfunded liability down the road in the event that we have to reinstate it, with the assumption that the forecast looks good when we're facing what could be World War III. We're facing higher inflation rates than we've seen. We're facing higher gas and other kinds of energy costs. And would it not, in fact, be more prudent to increase our reserves?
I believe the economist did say that when the economy starts to get overheated, we see inflation, the Fed starts playing with interest rates, and if they don't get it right, which they sometimes don't, a recession is quite possible. So, economic cycles are what they are. On the other hand, a child care tax credit is also going to be, any kind of help we give people will be hard to cut back, especially when it's a recession. So,
One more piece of context here is just to say, I understand, I can hear the committee's concern about out-year revenues, but I guess what I'm sort of saying here is that both budget constructs that are coming to you, so include tax cuts of approximately $50 million. And so, you all, if you cut, say, the child tax credit, or you didn't reduce taxes as much, you would, in a sense, be just transferring that sort of capacity over to the appropriation side, because the governor's budget includes $50 million worth of tax credits.
Everybody's spending all the money.
Yeah, so I would guess you're not really creating unless you put it in reserves, as Senator Brock said, you're just creating more capacity for another side of the equation.
That's why I said put it in reserves.
Right. So unless
there
you
should
put
be at least one adult in the State House. To be perfectly
everybody
blunt.
else is fighting over whether we're buying lollipops or potatoes. So everybody has spent the money, so no one can point the finger and say they're spending everything. This committee is quite free to decide. We frequently are more conservative about taxes than the other body. Not usually than the administration, but
the administration has been conservative in other aspects of spending by far.
So
as urged caution.
We will see where we go with this, but Graham, I guess what we need from you, and maybe we'll ask Sarah or somebody just to come over and talk to us a little bit more about the budget and its present state and what is in the reserves. We have been doing our reserves have been full, so it would be worth checking about reserves and where we are. And I don't know if that's Catherine or Sarah or who that is, but I don't think it's Graham. And we'll get the tax commissioner in tomorrow and see what we can get on the governor's proposals. And we're looking at any interplay between other things in the tax code and this, the child care tax credit. It would be the first time we gave with one hand and found out they fell off the cliff with another, which is one reason that we've used the earned income tax credit, because it doesn't impact other services like your CFAP or CCFAP, your child care. So Senator Pearson, have you got anything you want to throw into this mix?
I think we've covered our bases here. I'm glad I would appreciate an update on the revenue, on the reserves. I agree with what you just said. I understand they to be full, but we should confirm that.
And confirm any, unless there's some legal limitation, nothing says we can't reserve funding. But that might get some pushback too. So, any other thoughts, committee? Graham, anything you think we should know at this point? We'll all hope Abby is feeling better by tomorrow.
Senator Cummings,
Is that, yes, Faith.
this is Faith. I'm scheduling this for Thursday. Tomorrow, we have a miscellaneous tax bill and a whole host of people scheduled.
Oh, that's right. That's gonna really make this difficult. That's why I put things on Thursday. Before we knew it was going to go this way. Okay. We're a day behind. They'll just have to cope. All right. Thursday may be a long day.
What are you doing Saturday?
We could meet on Saturday or we could meet next Monday. It's nothing like Easter with a meeting before, but Monday might be
I'll
possible.
write eggs around.
You'll
Madam
like it.
Chair,
Friday night is the first night of Passover for people who
That's true.
celebrate Passover.
Well, no, we won't be here Friday night. Okay, Senator
Matt.
Pearson. Yeah,
just a wonderment for you. Are people asking for the bill to be voted out Friday or for us to, because it strikes me we would be more likely to easily commit to figures, if we didn't have policy language perfect, et cetera, that'd be a different question, but might well be able to agree to, the budgetary confines that would help probes do their work.
the instructions I had were that the budget had to be voted out by Friday, which meant all the necessary, if any, revenue had to be out by Friday. When we finish up, I shall go down the hall and inform them that we are working on this, but given that it is somewhat of a religious holiday weekend for several faiths, we may have trouble scheduling evening meetings, and we will do our best. And we also there's a good chance Abby won't be back tomorrow. I mean, just given Graham was home.
I think this is a bill in which prayer will help.
Prayer just might help.
By Monday, we might be inspired.
And chocolate and matzah too.
Chocolate and matzah, okay. And, all right, so anyway, I think that's probably the best we can do at this point.
That's Hanukkah.
All right, so committee, there is a chairs meeting at 4:30, but the rest of you can go home.
Matzah.
Thank you.
It's like,
Ending live stream now.